The way the fight between Aragaki and Joe ended was probably the best way to go about it, because if Joe would have won, it would have felt like a stretch, because at the end of the day, Aragaki is a much more skilled individual. He has been doing boxing for a lot longer than even Joe. On top of that, he was taught by Coach Nambu, and he learned everything that he needed to know. While, Joe, he's recently started to learn from Coach Nambu, and started to learn new techniques and utilize them, so obviously the original person that learned from the coach should have the advantage. And so, if Joe would have won in a slugfest and knocked the man out, and it would have been wrapped up GG right then and there, it would have felt like a stretch. And if Aragaki won, it would have kind of conflicted with our main antagonist of the series, which is technically Yuri, because there's not a lot of episodes for them to spend focusing on, Aragaki and his plot point if they were to, drag it out a couple more episodes. So this was the best way to go about his little character subplot and handle it with this episode. So he lost because of his injury, his leg, which makes perfect sense. It does, because at the end of the day, even though he's a skilled fighter, when you get an injury like losing your leg and you're still trying to fight, it's a miracle the man's even fighting in Megalo boxing. It's ridiculous. But when you lose something like a leg that's that vital to being a boxer, it's going to be hard to keep up with people. And it's amazing he managed to make it in the top 20. That is an insane feat. He needs to, pat himself on the back just to be able to make it that far in Megalo boxing while not having any legs. If he did have legs, he easily could have been a champion because of just his skill we saw in this episode. And what it really came down to was him losing thanks to his leg. So let's get into that. So we were given details to why the match had to end. This was Aragaki's final boxing match. This was the end of all. For instance, he wanted to be done. And this is kind of like him turning and closing the final page of the book and moving on with his life. Because, see, he's not just moving on from, just the problems he had in the past with losing his legs to Coach Nambu and all of that. That's not what he's moving on from. He's also moving on from boxing in general, because if he continues to do it, his life will be threatened even more than it already is, and he cherishes his life. For him to grab on to that dog racing ticket while he was crying and all that, it shows that he wants to live. He does not want to die, and so his life is more important than to continuing to box and then just die boxing for no reason at all. He doesn't want to do that. And so he finally settled the matter. He finally put aside boxing and all of his resentment and his hatred towards anyone around him that he used to blame. So it's like him, moving on. And I love that part of the episode. It added a lot of depth to this episode and allowed us to give some closure to Aragaki as a character. We now understand where he's going to be or what role he's going to play in this series now, because he no longer wants to be a boxer. Because if he would have continued on with the fight with, Joe, he probably would have been paralyzed. He would have continued to fight, his legs would have gotten a lot worse, and he would have eventually probably gotten paralyzed, where he would be even worse off than he already is. So he stopped it right then and there. So I like the outcome. Outcome overall of this match, it couldn't have been any better. I really have no complaints whatsoever, and I think many can agree with me in terms of how the fight ended. It was unexpected. We didn't expect it to kind of end like that, but it was tasteful in that regard. Speaking of the way the fight ended, if there's one thing that this episode did a fantastic job with, it's the fact that I didn't know who was going to win throughout the entirety of this. Normally, when I watch a show, I could kind of speculate that, the MC is going to win because MC. I mean, it's kind of like how it always is for almost any series. Usually the main character, they have to win. They have to make it to the very end. If they're going to lose, it's going to be the final part of the series. And so, because of that, normally you would say Joe's automatically going to win. That's what you would think. But the way the tension of this match was done, you can't really judge who was going to win, because constantly throughout this match, we were reminded that if Joe was to lose this, then they have another shot. They can have another shot in a match to try to get into, Megalonia, and so it's not completely GG yet. So that meant that if Joe lost, there's still a chance. So he could potentially lose this fight, and Aragaki could have won. Or Joe could have won and beat, Aragaki. So because of this, I didn't know who was going to win throughout the entirety of the match, which made the episode even more enjoyable for me, and I think many can agree with that fact that the way they handled that tension and not really letting us know who was going to win made this episode 10 times better. The voice acting of Aragaki for the scene when he is about to take his own life, and he starts to contemplate. He grabs the ticket that Nambu gave him, and you just see him crying. The voice acting in that moment was incredible. I honestly was just stunned by how good that voice acting was, because I'm just like, the way the character had that contrast in his voice, like how we've heard him throughout the entirety of the series or from these recent episodes, and then you hear him crying and all that, I'm like, oh my god, like it was a very real voice. Like, the voice actor put all of his emotions into those lines, and I just want to give props to that. That truly blew me away. Speaking of the actual fighting, so it turned out to be straight up a slugfest. Our characters going in, punching each other, which, oh my god, that looked incredible. Like, the cinematography on the spinning of the camera around Joe and Aragaki when they were punching each other was something I haven't seen in a while. I mean, I guess the recent example that I saw with a camera spinning like that was from Izuku from My Hero Academia. I'm not going to go into any details in case you're not caught up, but basically, the camera, I love that. I've always been a big fan of, like, the rotation of cameras around, like, a character. Like, when you see the character's face, and then it completely rotates around them, and you see their back and all that, and we see the other character's face. I've always loved that type of stuff, and so seeing that scene in the middle of the slugfest, how the camera rotates, that impressed me quite a bit, and I would love more of that. Now, I saw some actually complaining about this episode, saying that the fighting felt very simple. It didn't feel very good at all, and I'm scratching my head here, like, I understand not everybody's gonna like the art style, because it is kind of like an oldish looking art style, but it's intentional, but I don't think that the episode looked bad. Even animation-wise, I don't think it looked that bad. Maybe I'm blind and I didn't notice, but looking at the art and the animation for this episode, it looked really good, but I could be wrong. If I didn't notice something, and there was like a lot of still frames or something, let me know in the comments below, but I saw a couple of complaining to me on Twitter, and I just don't see it. I rewatched the episode again just to make sure, and I didn't notice anything really wrong with the episode in that one segment with the fighting. I don't know, I just felt like even if it was simplistic, it was meant to be like that, just to show how they were both just slugfesting each other, because when it comes to just punching back and forth, there really isn't a whole lot going on. It's mainly just endurance between the two characters, and that's kind of what the match was about in the first place, the two characters enduring each other's hits, because, I mean, Aragaki, he was having to endure his leg problems, because every time he kept fighting and taking blows, it was hurting his legs, while Joe is someone that doesn't have gear, and so the heavier hits are hitting him, and it's making him, actually want to go down even quicker. So they both had their flaws, their weaknesses, and they were both basically fighting for time, endurance. And so whoever went down first was pretty much GG'd right then and there. So I feel like, I don't know, I just, the complaints that some of the people have with this episode, I don't think it's necessarily that warranted, honestly. So Joe, he has beat Aragaki. He has gained a lot of fame. A lot of people are taking notice of him, calling him Gearless Joe, Gearless Joe, Gearless Joe. They're all chanting that. Even conferences and stuff, or people that are talking to the camera and their other fighters, they're having them overshadowed by Gearless Joe. So it shows that Joe's popularity has jumped considerably, and he's starting to take the spotlight. And we have these characters introduced at the end of the episode. We have Mikio, I think that's his name. I could be misremembering it, but we have a character that's next to Yuri talking to him, and judging by the names that were stated, from the Megalo tournament and all that, it doesn't seem like Mikio or whatever is a part of it. So most likely he might be Joe's next opponent. He might be going up against Joe to steal his spotlight, because think about what Joe's been doing. Joe has been an underdog and all that since the very beginning, fighting fighters, slowly working up and going with the gimmick, which is being completely gearless. And so that's how he's managed to slowly move up and get a lot of fans. And so obviously individuals that want to get into Megalonia and all that, be a part of the tournament, they might go after Joe, because if they get him, they could secure their spot in the tournament. So I feel like this Mikio dude is probably going to attack Joe, because if he knows if he, beats him, he can get in. to fight Yuri and everybody else. We also have another dude called Bloody Lion, I think that's his name. Bloody Lion was also introduced, and I feel like he's probably going to be a very savage fight. Like, I don't know, just something is telling me that the way the dude is built and designed and all that, that the man is probably going to be one of those very, very hard fights for Joe in the future if he does have to fight him, but we'll see where that goes. But that's pretty much it when it comes to this week's episode of Megalo Box. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How'd you feel about this week's episode? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Please be honest in the comments below. And I love you guys. How do you feel about the series thus far? Do you like the pacing of it, the direction that the story's been taking? Be honest. I love you guys. Have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload content, please click the bell icon down below next to the subscribe button. And with that, Chibi out.